like, I come off as a smartass, and I recognize that, and it's how I am, it's who I am as a person. But if I didn't know as much or I didn't care as much as I do about some of these things, I wouldn't be good at my job.
Hello, Dog Nation, and welcome back to the Dog Nation Tell All. I am your host, Kaylee Mansell, and this is the series where we take a deep dive into the stories and the behind-the-scenes moment of all of your favorite Dog Nation insiders. And I have to say, today is one that I am very much looking forward to. It is the co-host of Dog Nation at Large and our resident pop culture king, Connor. Connor, thanks for having us on Tell All.
Is there one of these that you're not looking forward to?
I can't answer that. I plead the fifth. I'm looking forward to everyone's, but like for you, like I feel like I get the chance to talk to you a lot, but sometimes I feel like I don't know that much about you because you're a little bit guarded with your personal life. So I'm excited to get down to business.
Okay.
All right. So I want to start with the first one, which is in the ones that we've done in the past, I feel like you have a unique perspective because you didn't grow up a Georgia fan, but you went to the University of Georgia. So why did you choose Georgia?
I mean, the most honest answer is my parents made it pretty clear they'd really like me to stay in state. And I knew that I wanted to go to a big school. I wanted to go to a good journalism program, and Georgia Tech doesn't really have that. So Georgia seemed like the easiest option. It was the one school I applied to. I got in early, and from there I was like, okay, cool. I know what I'm doing. I know where I'm going to college.
I feel like you were there during an interesting time too, because you were there from 2012 to spring of 2016. So you were there during the Mark Richt era, and then Kirby Smart comes in. What was the vibe around campus when it was announced that Kirby Smart was going to be the next coach of the Georgia Bulldogs?
I think at that point, a lot of people had just sort of accepted it. I remember covering that coaching search, and there wasn't an obvious sort of second candidate there. I think we'd all sort of known that Mark Richt, the thing had run its course. You can pick which game was the final straw. You could say it was the 9-6 Missouri game, which some people say is the worst they've ever seen. You could say the Faton Bauta 27-3 game, which in my mind is the worst Georgia football game I've ever seen. In hindsight, and this is a point Brandon Adams has made, like the fact that Georgia went to overtime with Georgia Southern was also pretty damning as well. And there was also a whole kerfuffle with Jeremy Pruitt, maybe potentially fighting on staff. It was just a real mess at the end, and as much as people liked Mark Richt and what he stood for and how he represented Georgia, I think at that point in time, too, they were also ready for a change. It also didn't help that, Alabama came in Athens that year. Georgia was undefeated. Alabama was not. And Alabama whooped Georgia's behind in the rain, and that's putting it nicely. And I think from that point, it was like, okay, like Richt has taken his program as far as they can. Maybe Kirby can turn it around. I don't think anyone expected it to be as quickly as it did. And I can even tell you, before 2021, even during the run of that season, I think there were still people like, is Georgia actually going to do it? And it's one of those things of, you're cursed for so long, you don't know if you're actually going to be able to do it. And then to actually do it, it was really cool to be along for the entire ride. I was there at Kirby's introductory press conference. I was there at the first signing day with Jacob Eason, and so I've been able to follow along the ride for pretty much its entirety.
So I do want to talk about your time at the Red and Black. What's a story that you remember writing? Like, what was the biggest story you wrote while you were there?
I think the one that jumps to mind at the Red and Black specifically, Malcolm Mitchell going into his senior year, that was when he was first starting to write children's books. He'd had, I think, the CBS This Morning feature done on him, and I got a chance to just sit down and talk with him for about 30 minutes about sort of his story, why he was doing this, and also balancing the football aspect of it all there as well. And, Malcolm Mitchell, guy who won a Super Bowl with the Patriots, played in the 28-3 game, had some big catches in that game. So it was really cool to sort of follow his career because I think we were both freshmen at the same time. And then obviously he unfortunately tears his ACL in the first game of the 2013 season, and sort of seeing him, be a guy who admitted, like, yeah, I was not a great reader, and becoming the well-rounded person that he is. Like, that's a big reason why we do this. I love going to the games and things like that, but it is really cool, especially for me, and certainly my time with Dog Nation. Like Amarius Mims last year, taken in the first round. I was in Cochran, Georgia at Bleckley County when he committed to Georgia that day. And so getting to follow those guys throughout and having the ability to document their stories and tell their stories, I think is something that is really cool. And like getting to do that with Malcolm Mitchell is one that stands out there that day.
So we've talked about your time at Georgia. We'll get to your time at Dog Nation, but I want to go back to little baby Connor? Like, at what age did you just know that you cared about sports more than most people?
This would have been June of 2001. I was 7 years old. I rode my bike over to Stuart O'Connor's house, and we were going to go ride to our swim team practice. And we're eating Wildberry Pop-Tarts, and he had SportsCenter on the TV. And I had never seen SportsCenter. I had no idea what it was. And I just sort of sit down and watch it, and I can still remember it was Scott Van Pelt and Stuart Scott were anchors, and I just sort of knew watching it, like, oh, I'm going to do that one day. And it's really cool that in a way it's worked out where, like, because I know so many people don't get this, but it crystallized for me really early on of what I wanted to do, and it turns out that I actually happen to be kind of good at it. And so it worked out that way. And just from a very early age, it was always like, oh yeah, Connor's going to work in sports somehow. And, I didn't know that it was going to be writing. I thought that I wanted to be the next Scott Van Pelt. And then when I get to college and I'm sitting down doing the Georgia Grady News Source broadcast, and I'm just so uncomfortable with myself. And I'm like, one, Scott Van Pelt is like incredible at what he does. And I don't think that you can appreciate that until like you sit down and try and like talk on a camera for a living. And two, like, I was just like, okay, like, I know I'm not going to be able to do it as well as he can. I got to find some other way. And like, fortunately, by that point, I had already started writing, and I just sort of kept writing, and I think I got better and better at it. And because of the fact that I had this TV background or this working and technical background, when it came time to get to SEC Country and then eventually Dog Nation, I had all these skills where, like, sure, I wasn't the best at any one of them, but because I could do everything, I think that sort of helped me survive where, early on, a lot of kids in journalism, I think they turn out, 2-3 years into the profession just because it's really difficult.
Yeah.
And you have to, more than anything, just find a way to survive until you can eventually work your way up there. And I was fortunate enough in that I was able to do that because of the skills that I had picked up along the way.
So how did you survive it through that time?
Honestly, just being dumb. And like if I was more aware and had a better sense of things, like I probably wouldn't be doing this. When I played high school football, like I'm not a big dude. There was a time, yes, Dog Nation people can attest to this, where I was overweight and I was like 250 pounds. In high school, I was a 5'10", 185-pound offensive lineman. Like I played at a 6A level, which at the time was the biggest. And like, they just don't, like, you're not supposed to be an offensive lineman at that size. And I found a way to keep working and keep playing hard. And, I was naive enough to believe that, like, hey, if you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything. And, like, it worked out. And I can remember one of my coaches one time telling me in the weight room, he's like, Connor, I got to be honest, I didn't think you would be doing this. I didn't have it. And kind of like owning up to, like, yeah, I didn't expect anything from you. And I didn't obviously know how to respond to that. But I just think it's one of those things of, if I had been maybe a little bit more aware, like cared a little bit more, I probably don't. I'm probably doing something else. I'm probably making my dad real happy, like studying law or something like that.
Felt that.
But I was just like, I'm just going to keep my head down and keep working and see how long this ride goes and until they tell me to stop. And, one time, unfortunately, they did tell me to stop. But, I've been very fortunate now to be doing this. This will be my 11th season covering Georgia football in some capacity. And so it's just, something you just got to keep your head down and go. It unfortunately doesn't always work out for you that way, but for me so far it has.
I always wondered, because you were an offensive lineman in high school, when you watch Georgia football games, do you find yourself analyzing and evaluating the offensive line more?
No.
Really?
No. I mean, like, I play the position. I love it. I think it helps me in my writing that I can write about in very specific ways, specifically playing the center position. But I just think in general, I have such a love for football that I'm not focused on one position, or I very much enjoy getting to sit up there and actually watch the game and see it unfold. And like, I do think, so many people are able to go back and watch the film nowadays, and film has, I think, expanded people's knowledge of the game. But I just think, I don't know why, but I'm able to see the game very clearly, and it helps certainly from having a press box view in real time of like what's happening. And that is something where it comes through, obviously, like playing football helped in that regard, but I just think watching an obscene amount of football sort of teaches you and lets you know sort of what to look for as a play is unfolding. If I weren't working, I'd probably be watching college football all day. On Sundays, like, I try to get all my work done by 1 o'clock. That way I can watch 7 hours of uninterrupted football on Red Zone, and then obviously the Sunday night game. And I just, watching football is such a joy because it's something different in each play. And it's not just focusing on the offensive lineman, but, with 11 guys on the field, there's a good chance, especially when you're covering certainly a program as good as Georgia or watching the NFL, there's going to be someone who's going to do something cool and awesome on each play. And so you try and find that and drill down on that. And then after it happens in college, you get to write about it.
I do want to talk about, you are unapologetically a Celtics fan, a Patriots fan. I'm assuming you're a Red Sox fan? Yes. Okay. What is it about professional sports that intrigues you so much?
I mean, my family's from the Northeast. My parents are from New Jersey. I have a lot of family growing up scattered around, Connecticut, New York area. And pro sports was just always bigger up there. And, I spend my summers in New York listening to sports talk radio up there where they're talking Yankees and Mets all the time. In the winter, I went to a Patriots-Jets game in New Jersey before I ever went to a college football game. And so I just think that, pro sports was always sort of the avenue in, like parents didn't go to big colleges. My dad went to Dayton. My mom went to what is now Southern New Hampshire University. Those don't have sort of the football programs that they have down here. And so, college sports was just not a huge thing until obviously, you get 9, 10 years old and you start getting into all types of sports and figuring out from there, like this idea of, taking your kids to a tailgate and enjoying a full day in Athens. That was not something that I did. The first Georgia game I ever went to was my freshman year when I was a student.
Wow.
And so I think it's one of those things, like the first college football game I ever went to was a Georgia Tech Boston College game in the fall of 2007. So, it's one of those things, I just didn't really grow up around it.
Did you have any culture shocks at your first Georgia game?
I didn't have any culture shocks. I had culture hots because it was 100 degrees that day. Georgia was playing Buffalo, and it was just so unbelievably hot. And Todd Gurley, I believe, returned the opening kickoff for a touchdown. And they were up, I think, by 2 scores at the end of the first quarter. I'm like, all right, I'm going back to my dorm room to cool off because it is far too hot to be in Sanford Stadium that day. And so that's sort of, Georgia-Buffalo was my first Georgia football game.
Okay. All right, let's fast forward to your time at Dog Nation. So you started at Dog Nation. You were a freelancer right after college, or at least for SEC Country and AJC. You've been a part of I guess, Cox for a while now. And this is what you always wanted to do. You always wanted to work in sports, maybe not necessarily a sports writer, but what was that feeling of knowing that you were doing exactly what you told everyone you were going to do?
Well, and when I started at Dog Nation, I did not feel that way. 'Cause I got laid off at SEC Country in May of 2018. And that's one of those things of, you go through it. And again, I spoke earlier about the naivete of it all. You never think that you're going to be the one laid off. And so losing that job really messed me up. And it's one of those things of, and I was very fortunate in that when I was at SEC Country, my desk was right behind Brandon's, and we got to talk a lot, and Brandon got to know me a lot. And I fundamentally believe that the biggest reason I am here right now is because of Brandon Adams, and that's why I love him to death. And so they were like, we have a position for you. You'll help do some producing. You'll do some writing. It'll be a freelance to start with the possibility of it turning into, potentially a full-time job, which is what happened at SEC Country. And I had other job offers elsewhere, but I don't want to move. I was going to be in Atlanta, and I thought, I've bet on myself once and it worked out. Why not try and do it again? This would get me back to games, which was something that I wasn't necessarily doing at SEC Country and I wanted to get back to doing. And I said, yeah, you're going to be on the game. You're going to be at games. You're going to be on the sidelines filming them, something I had never done, something I don't want to do ever again because it is, one, those August and September games are unbearably hot. When you have the bib, you have whatever you're wearing, you're running around the whole time, you're in the sun. The sunburn, there are pictures of me where I am just like redder than a Georgia helmet red. And I have all the respect in the world for the guys that do that, who shoot it with cameras, because it is so physically exhausting. And then you have to go and box out and set up and do those interviews afterwards. And it is writing is easy. You're sitting in an air-conditioned press box, you're using your fingers at most. It was such a physically demanding job. The other side of it is that, getting to see the game from a field level is so cool. And once you sort of get adjusted to the speed and see and understand what you're looking at, it opens things up in a totally different way. And so I think that experience, as difficult as it was for me, because it was something I'd never been doing before, it was something I hadn't envisioned doing, but it allowed me to get my foot in the door. And I think as I expanded and grew more and started to do more as a writer, that experience of working behind the scenes and working with the camera, I think helped improve me in that regard of to do what I'm doing now.
So when you were at Georgia, you saw the end of Mark Richt, you saw the beginning of Kirby Smart. When you got rehired, could you have ever anticipated what Georgia would go on to do in the following years? Because you're right. You said it best. When Georgia's winning, people care more. And I feel like 2018, when you would have come back, is when people really started to care.
Yeah, because the last game that I was not technically covering Dog Nation. I was covering it from a Georgia angle, but it was the first Alabama-Georgia national championship. And I had pitched hey, would it be all right if I go to Athens downtown and write about the scene and whatnot? And I was watching the game from a college bar that I attended quite frequently and spent a lot of money at over my time in Athens.
Do you want to plug or not?
No.
Okay.
They don't deserve that bar. The bar is still there in Athens, but it is no longer the bar that it once was. And so I think it's one of those things of, the last game was a game where Georgia was 3 plays away from winning a national title. And so coming into that, you have these expectations where I think in my time here, every year that I've been able to go to games, Georgia has gone to the SEC championship. I couldn't go in 2020 because they limited who would cover, and Georgia thus did not go to the SEC championship that year. And so they've always been in the mix. And, again, I always held the belief that, football is a game of just finite breaks where, you can do everything right, but if 3 or 4 breaks don't go your way, you're not winning a title. And I think that's what the Patriots illuminated, where you just need to be close every year. And some years you're going to get those breaks, some years you're not. And I think for a long time that's where Georgia was. And in 2021 they got those breaks. In 2022 they got those breaks. And those Georgia teams are great. But I think it does a disservice to the game of football. You can have the best team ever, but you need certain things or certain plays to go your way. You need Noah Ruggles to miss a kick. You need Alabama to not have its 2 best wide receivers. And that doesn't take away from what Georgia did, because there are times when Georgia was on the other end of that, not having, say, a 14 playoff in 2007, not having, the Chris Conley play in 2012. I'm not going to bring up more painful Georgia memories here, but I just sort of think that's the way that football goes. And if you're able to be close every year like Georgia has, again, you're not going to win every year, but you're going to get the benefit more often than not.
So what you're saying is that luck and chance do play a certain role in the victories that we've seen.
Oh, 100%. Not in every victory, but in football jargon, you win roughly about 50% of your one-score games. And so the key shouldn't be to find a way to win more of those one-score games. Some teams do that. I think Nebraska over the last 5 seasons is 3-18 in one-score games, whereas I think Clemson is 11-6. The key is to be good enough to where you're not finding yourself in one-score games. And I think that's the biggest thing that Kirby Smart has done. He's upped the talent level so much to where, in the Mark Richt era, you're not having that 2012 loss to South Carolina, although that game was a blowout. I'm trying to think, the 2014 loss to South Carolina, or even the 2014 loss to Georgia Tech, where those were one-score games and ball just doesn't go your way. The key is to not play in those one-score games because you have so much talent and you're so much better. In that 2022 season, Georgia played 2 one-score games. They were fortunate enough to win both of those. And so if you're finding a way to not play in those one-score games, that's going to help you out in the end.
So where do you see the future headed for the UJ football program?
It'll be interesting. Look, so long as Kirby Smart is here, Georgia's going to continue to invest and make sure that they are one of the best programs in college football. It's hard to say right now what the 12-team playoff is going to look like. It's hard to say what a 16-team SEC is going to look like. But I believe that Georgia's going to be there more often than not. And Kirby Smart has shown that he's been able to navigate NIL well so far. Georgia continues to sign elite recruiting classes at a clip that really only Nick Saban has matched. He's found a way to navigate the transfer portal. He's won a title where he had to go out and add Darian Kendrick late, and he was a huge piece of that 2021 national title team. And then in 2022, they don't need any transfers. And then going into this 2024 season, they're bringing in 10. So I think he's shown to be flexible in that regard, which I think is the most important thing, because college football coaches in general, a lot of things, stubborn is one of them. And so his ability to show flexibility in that regard, I think, is going to have Georgia positioned to be near the top every year. I don't know if they're going to win it as often as they have in recent years, but I have a belief that they're going to be in contention.
You talk about comparisons. Some people say it's hard to compare LeBron James to Michael Jordan. Herschel Walker to Brock Bowers, but you're very keen on the fact that you think that Brock Bowers is the greatest player to ever wear a Georgia uniform. Please go into extensive detail. Don't miss a thing. Why? I can't see the single. 2, 1. Oh, okay, yeah.
Brock won two national titles.
And Herschel won 1.
And Herschel won 1.
It looked like a 12 from where I was sitting.
I mean, for every snap Brock Bowers was on the field in his time at Georgia, he was Georgia's best offensive player. And more often than not, he was probably the best overall player as well. The game of football is very different in 1980. The running back position is very different than it would be today. I'm not taking anything away from Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker is an incredible football player. Won the Heisman Trophy, Georgia's last Heisman Trophy winner. His statistics for a 3-year stretch, nearly unmatched. I believe Derrick Henry did surpass his all-time rushing yardage mark. But again, you know, like Nick Chubb had an incredible career. He still couldn't quite get close to Herschel Walker's rushing records. When Brock Bowers was on the field, and Georgia was just a very different team to where like they didn't need to force feed Brock the way that I think those Georgia teams elected to force feed Herschel. I think if they had elected to do so, Brock could have had 1,600 receiving yards and 16 receiving touchdowns every season he played. They didn't need him to do that. The fact that he was able to step in as a freshman and, you know, like, look, you go back and watch Herschel, the physical nature of him obviously stands out. Like, he is a grown man running amongst boys. Brock is not some overwhelming monster. Like, in fact, in discussing, you know, his NFL stock, one of the popular things that brought up, like, he looks small compared to Darnell Washington.
Sure.
And yet Brock dominated all the same. He ran past guys. He ran over guys. He was Georgia's leading receiver in the 2 games that he lost in college, both against Alabama. And, you know, he would have put up better numbers in the second game had he not been hurt there. His first catch in Sanford Stadium was a touchdown. His last catch in Sanford Stadium was a touchdown. He won 2 national championships. He went 42-2 in his time here at Georgia. I think, like, and look, it's hard to conceptualize right now just what this era of Georgia football is going to look like because we're living in it. Whereas, you know, the Herschel one, we know how everything played out after the fact there. But I just think the fact that, again, you know, I can roll off the numbers. Most receiving yards ever by a tight end. First 2-time Mackey Award winner. You know, single school season record for receiving touchdowns as a freshman. All these great accomplishments. When you watch Brock play, it will never, in my opinion, see a tight. Like, we've seen running backs dominate the way Herschel did. We've never seen before a tight end like Brock Bowers, and I don't know if we're going to see one like him again.
So at what point during Brock Bowers' career did you sit there and think to yourself, yes, he's better than Herschel?
You know, it was probably after that Ole Miss game, his last game in Sanford Stadium, and I think it factors into it too, you know, like the fact that he could have sat out. He was already the greatest tight end in Georgia history by that point, and he had an ankle injury, he could have protected himself for the NFL draft. The fact that he pushed himself back in 26 days after tightrope surgery to come back and play, like, says a lot to me. And that's not to say that Herschel wouldn't have done something similar, because I believe that he would have. But that he came back and did that and then goes out there and catches a touchdown in a top 10 game to cap things off. It speaks to, obviously, the incredible physical athlete that Brock is, but also just the truly transcendent mental athlete that Brock is. You know, I think one of the things where I hold Jordan above LeBron is just that, you know, Jordan just by his sheer force got the goals there, whereas LeBron, incredible player, 3rd best player of all time, maybe 4th. Basketball, okay. Yeah. LeBron moved teams a lot and changed a lot, whereas Jordan, you know, obviously until he went to go play for the Wizards.
And played baseball.
And his prime time, always with the Bulls, and always uplifted that around him. And I think Brock had a similar impact on the University of Georgia.
So Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Herschel Walker, Brock Bowers presents this conversation that we keep having of old age versus new age. You being a new age journalist and being here during the shift of college football, what do you prefer? Like the old age version of college football or like post-NIL new era football?
Oh, I mean, well, like, I'm excited for the 12-team playoff. I think it's going to open more things up. It's going to give us more games, more to look forward to. I get why players are played. I think they do. I think when you have billion-dollar TV contracts, it's hard to keep that money away from them. They've obviously earned it. They're the ones putting themselves out there. But I sympathize with people that NIL and transfer portal coming of age at the same time has had a negative impact on the sport. And, players moving around, it just becomes hard to know, hey, am I going to have this guy for 3-4 years, or is he going to be a one and done? I think you can look at the NBA, and the fact that you do have guys changing teams all the time has absolutely hurt that sport. And so, there's a reason why TV ratings are higher when Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors are playing than anyone else, because he's always been a Golden State Warrior. And when you turn on a Golden State Warrior game, you're getting Steph Curry. I worry moving forward that as we get away from this and we get deeper and guys moving around more frequently, and we'll see how much it stands and changes, I worry that people are going to be like, okay, who am I rooting for this time? And who am I following from a recruiting standpoint? And I do worry that is where the game is going. As far as NIL, players, yeah, they should be able to get what they want. And if coaches can't do a good enough job of keeping up and enticing it, it's up to the NCAA or whoever, there needs to be somebody to emerge as a leader in college sports to be like, hey, we're going to start officially putting some guardrails. And no one has stepped up, in my opinion, to do that. And they keep sort of looking around and like, hey, Congress, can you help us with this? As if Congress doesn't have enough going on at the moment. And so I just think that, look, until someone really wants to be a leader in college football and save the sport from itself, that's unfortunately just sort of where we are.
All right, Connor, now that you have told all, I'm going to have you tell me a little bit. This is our rapid fire segment. We've got some things for you. Okay. I hope you are excited. All right, let's start with the easy ones. What's the greatest UJ sports moment you've witnessed with your own eyes?
Oh, it's the Keely Ringo interception to win the school's first national title since 1980.
You were the first person to get that answer. I've been waiting on it. Good job. Who's the greatest athlete of all time? Doesn't have to be Georgia player. Greatest athlete.
I'm gonna go Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Wow. If you could trade lives with any one person for the day, who would you trade lives with?
For a day.
For a day.
Glenn Powell.
Really?
He's having a great time right now.
You want to be in the new Twisters movie?
Yeah, I do.
Walk the red carpet. All right, you are a big pop culture phenom.
I am.
This might be the toughest question you get. What's one movie you think everyone should watch?
Heat. It's the greatest movie of all time.
What?
First time Robert De Niro and Al Pacino are ever on screen together. It's a perfect movie.
That's a good answer. Who would be your dream Dog Nation at-large guest? Glenn Powell?
No, because he's a Texas fan.
Oh.
So I'm worried we might actually see him, or if he's not the college game day picker for when Georgia and Texas play this next season, I have some questions. The answer to your question, it's probably Kyle Chandler, aka Coach Eric Taylor, from Friday Night Lights. He attended the University of Georgia, and so I think it'd be cool to cut things up with him.
In character.
In character and out of character, because he's been a lot of great stuff. Wolf of Wall Street, I believe he was in Argo.
Yeah,
he's the FBI agent in that.
All right, what's the best restaurant to eat at in Athens?
Am I allowed to give free plugs away? Is Brandon okay with this?
I didn't think about that. I just figured that since you're Athens, I feel like considering our apparel, the rules have been thrown out the window.
This is not, Creature Comfort is a very special place to me for a number of reasons. But that's technically not a restaurant.
Maybe just not franchise,
Well, Chuck's is a franchise, but...
Is that what you were going to say?
I think Chuck's comes to mind, yeah.
Okay, if we need to bleep it out, we can do that.
Okay.
All right. What's the best Taylor Swift song?
The best Taylor Swift song
Had to do something.
The best Taylor Swift song is Blank Space. It is a modern pop masterpiece. She will not make a better song than that. However, it is not my favorite Taylor Swift song.
Well, what's your favorite Taylor Swift song?
Our Song.
Oh, yeah. Okay, but I do feel like Blank Space is one that those at home might actually know. So
yeah, I would argue it's also probably her biggest song.
Ooh, I'm excited to ask you this one. You could go a bunch of different ways. If you could reverse the outcome of any one sporting event, what would it be?
Oh, it's Super Bowl 42. It's the 17-0 New England Patriots taking on the Giants.
Oh, Eli Manning.
And just to go 18-0, the helmet catch. I just think, again, to have been able to see that, to get Randy Moss a Super Bowl, Randy Moss, one of my favorite players. That's one. Though actually, in terms of fan annoyance, the second Giants Super Bowl loss was way more frustrating than the first one.
All right, not necessarily inspirations, but who is your current favorite sports media personality?
Scott Van Pelt is up there. I think he's incredible at what he does. like, I still listen to Bill Simmons a lot. He's not my favorite, but like I am loyal to him. Nick Wright is a like somewhat controversial figure. He's really, really good at what he does, and I have a lot of respect for what he does and the way that he goes about doing it. While I don't always agree with him on his takes, I think he is sort of in a modern way, like figured out a smart way of talking about sports in a way that I really appreciate and try and emulate.
Also, maybe the one sitting across from you, I don't know. Just thought that one might come into consideration at some point. Okay, what's the greatest album of all time?
I actually just did this because Apple did their top 100 albums, and there was a lot of dissatisfaction with that. And so my friends and I, we did our personal top 50 albums. And I believe my number one album was Room on Fire, The Strokes' 2003 second album. It is an incredible album, front to back. Just there's maybe one song on there that I skip, but there are so many just perfect songs on that album.
Will you ever go on the Dog Nation cruise?
Are these sponsors watching this?
I'm just wondering.
Never say never.
That was from the fans.
The
fans needed to know.
Never say never. I will not rule out going on the Dog Nation cruise.
Okay, Justin Bieber, never say never. Last thing, when you look back on your time at Dog Nation, what's your favorite Dog Nation memory?
This is a good one. It is the drive after that first national title, where it is myself, Brandon Adams, and Jeff Sentell in a minivan.
That feels right.
And we were dead tired. Like, I didn't go to bed until 5 o'clock in the morning from the night before. We do the press conference. It's like noon, and we got to drive back to Atlanta. And like, you talk about hero drives. Like, Brandon drove the entire way. It was just an incredible driving performance. We talked about the game, and it was really like it's one of those drives of like we hated it in the moment because it was just so long and so brutal. But you look back on it, and that's one of the great Dog Nation moments that I've gotten to experience.
Well, now that you've told us all, you've told us a little, now it's time to tell us your final thoughts. This is the open mic portion where the floor is yours, Connor.
Look, I see the comments out there of what people have to say when I'm on Dog Nation shows and things like that. I hear you. I recognize it. If I come off as a smartass, and I recognize that, and that's how I am. That's who I am as a person. But if I didn't know as much, or I didn't care as much as I do about some of these things, I wouldn't be good at my job. Mm-hmm. And being good at my job really matters to me. I'm not Randy Johnson. I'm not Justin Verlander. I'm looking to be like Jamie Moyer. I'm just trying to throw 6 innings, give up 3 runs, and pitch every 5th day. And I think I'm doing that. And I know I'm not the greatest. I know I get things wrong sometimes. I know that I am not the biggest Georgia fan. I know that I can be critical. I know people disagree with me. I just want to have a chance to get the ball again. And I love the chance that I get to come up and I get to throw and I get to keep on doing that every day. And I look forward to keeping on doing it. And look, again, maybe sometimes I throw a complete game. Sometimes I get chased out of there in the first inning. But know that I want to keep coming back and keep pitching again.
I get the chance to film with you almost every single week. And I think that's the most vulnerable I've seen you this far, and that's really what I wanted to accomplish through Dog Nation Tell All, was to get to see this different side of you, and hopefully everybody that's watching gets to see this side of you too. So I think the way that you went about that was really heartfelt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Connor, thank you so much for joining us on Dog Nation Tell All. It really has been my pleasure to have you. And Dog Nation, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to check out our other Dog Nation Tell Alls with Mike Griffith, Jeff Sentell, Brandon Adams. Thank Connor Riley for being here with us today, and we'll see you right back here next week on Dog Nation Tell All.